Hey guys, I'm back with an impromptu video on a very upsetting subject. I'll just put a warning out now. If you've been following this channel for a while, this video is gonna be particularly unpleasant in some ways. Dealing with the subject of prostitution, you can get kind of numb with time, but now and then horrors surface that still elicit rage, and this is certainly one. I just found an article from 1997 about a cooperation between a legal brothel in Maastricht, the Netherlands, and a psychiatric hospital. And this brothel was offering reduced prices for patients, should say male patients at the hospital, to come and pay for prostitution. And there is so much to discuss here. I just want to say right off the bat, before I go into the details of this case, I want to make very clear it's not an isolated case. There are cases of psychiatric hospitals, prisons. Again, there are distressed, self-harming men in these institutions, but they also are a place where men convicted of assault, rape, or murder are placed in many circumstances, and it's definitely also this kind of group of men we're talking about. And there are cases that I know of Germany, Canada, Switzerland, now the Netherlands, and I'm sure other places as well, where the caretakers of these patients or the wardens at a prison believe in the male right to sex so strongly, they will actively facilitate access to prostitution. And you can go back in history and look at some prison camps and some Nazi concentration camps where even they were making prostitution available to prisoners. One part of it is that even the most deprived man, there is still compassion from his fellow men for his biological needs, and the other is the belief that this will quell sexual violence directed at female patients, nursing staff, prison staff, etc. It will appease these men, calm them down, make them more compliant, and that there is this group of women who do not experience these men as threatening or disrespectful, dangerous rapists because it's their profession. They exist to absorb the danger and the dirt of society. That's what many, many people believe women in prostitution exist for. And this practice is the most obvious and horrific form that, what happens with these ideas when they come into practice. Some women are so tough, so smart, or so other and sexually strange than us. They can handle this. Now I'm already going into the big analysis and not the individual case, but I also want to add, before we go into it, the pro-prostitution lobby, not everyone, certainly, but a number of visible vocal individuals and organizations, certainly here in Germany, have said quite publicly that they support this. They support forms of this. They have advocated that it needs transparency, so you should let the woman in the brothel know, hey, the guy coming in, he's a convicted this and this. He's in a psychiatric institution, has been, assaulting the nurses or whatever. Let her know and let her make a decision. Because, of course, every woman in the sex trade is such an autonomous person that and so qualified in, psychiatric health that she would be able to assess who is safe and who isn't. And again, the idea that there are some women who'd happily take this on. There are individuals who claim this. And the reality is that there's a small section of women in the sex trade who can say no, but there are a lot who can't. You actually think that in most cases this is being clearly communicated to the often migrant women who don't speak the local language? No, of course not. That's not the reality. But even if it was, how degrading. You're literally saying, look, can you absorb the rape? Because, well, when he touches you, he penetrates you, his sweat and saliva are on you. That man that you know is a risk to other women or has perpetrated serious violence, you can handle that, right? That doesn't do anything to you physically, emotionally. Okay, so let's look at this individual case. Let me read you an article. Again, this is from the 90s, 1997, but these ideas are still around and these practices still exist, if they're not always quite so open, because I think any sane person, even if they believe that, prostitution is work, they would probably say, like, if I'm a server at a restaurant, I wouldn't want to serve, a convicted rapist. And the same way, women in a brothel wouldn't want to serve a convicted rapist. I think that's already where you see that this is complete nonsense, because whether you're giving that person food or you're having to get naked with them is worlds apart in terms of your safety. But, even if you believe that prostitution is work like any other, it's literally like retail, you'd probably agree that this is still cruel to say, you must serve these people. But anyway, now to the school of thought that thinks that this is a great idea and beneficial to all involved. So again, this was a psychiatric hospital in the Netherlands, in Maastricht. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly in Dutch. Maastricht. Okay, so the article says, long-term psychiatric patients of Maastricht's Viverdal Psychiatric Hospital can visit a brothel in the Limburg capital at a reduced rate. The brothel with which the arrangement has been made is run by a former psychiatric nurse. Instead of the normal rate of 125 guilders, Viverdal patients pay 75 guilders. And this arrangement was agreed upon because the patients have little money, said the official, hospital policy officer, Cecile Andestege, who initiated the program. I hope everyone could follow that. Guilder are like the old Dutch money. They have euros now, I'm pretty sure, but that's back when they had their own currency. And so, yeah, the hospital's policy officer had this idea that this would, solve some problems. Now, what problems? I already told you, but I'll make it more explicit. The article says, the psychiatric nurse hopes this will prevent unpleasant sexual intercourse and abuse at the institution. Recently, not the same hospital, but a different one in the Netherlands, publicly reported several rapes and assaults within the center to the police. So whether this has happened or they were just worried about it, in order to prevent it, that is why they made this arrangement with the local brothel. And so the policy officer of the hospital says, sex is an important biological need for which there is hardly any room in a psychiatric institution. Instead of ignoring this fact, institutions would do better to give patients the opportunity to satisfy their needs. And of course, we're just talking about the men. Now, a lot of women end up in psychiatric institutions because of trauma, often sexual trauma. And this is also not a healthy place to find a partner or date. I'm not saying that, having the urges is bad, wanting companionship is bad. I don't claim to be an expert on how to handle sexuality for psychiatric patients in a manner that is respectful of the individual. I can't say what the best policies is. I think if there's no reason not to, there should be privacy so that a person may masturbate. If they have a partner who comes to visit them and this person, is known to the staff and there's no reason to assume that there's any abuse, that they might want to have privacy within the facility. Maybe. I am speculating here. I don't claim to know. But, this kind of concern, and we've seen the same for like old people's homes, this like concern for an actual problem, the lack of privacy in places like this, for sexuality or other personal matters, that is taken as an excuse to facilitate brothel access for the male patients. Because of course, this is not about any female patient who is sexually frustrated. Because we know, unfortunately, we know the reality is that women who are given psychiatric diagnosis likely have previous sexual trauma and are, seen by predatory men as easy prey. And so the representative of the hospital continues and says, I have seen here women going to bed with men for a cigarette. Well, such things shouldn't happen. Sex here takes place under a bush or on the toilet. It's very unpleasant. I therefore suggest the patients who stay in the clinic permanently should be allowed to go to a brothel. I have no idea whether there might be like healthy relationships between patients. We're talking here specifically about people confined to a hospital for years or lifelong. And so I really actually understand that people have a right to some degree of privacy to live out a healthy form of sexuality. What that looks like exactly for someone with a severe psychiatric problem, I can't say. I also think that there are a lot of traumatized people institutionalized who might need different help than heavy medication, though I can't speak to individual cases or can put brush strokes on a very large, diverse population. But again, the idea is here, what she's really saying is we've got male patients. Some of these encounters might be consensual, like I'm not even saying that doesn't happen, but it's surely quite difficult to assess when these are, especially for the women, very vulnerable situations. And some of it is like prostitution happening inside the facility for like goods, like cigarettes, maybe snacks, of the male patients taking advantage of the female ones. And now you believe that you will train these men to leave the female patients alone and to not create, this intra-institution prostitution by letting them access regular prostitution. That they will not go around offering money or goods to women if they are doing that in a legal, supposedly regulated, prescribed setting. And believe me, I spent the last couple of months looking into the Dutch sex trade, and the situation in Dutch legal brothels is similar to the ones in Germany. It's full of flesh and blood pimps and poverty and addiction, and it is just a myth that the women in these brothels are there because this is their calling, this is fun, or this is like a waitressing job. None of these are true. The rates of assault in those places are high. I was reading a very detailed study of women in the Dutch legal sex trade, a study that had an overrepresentation of women who had a Dutch passport. This does not necessarily mean that they're not second-generation immigrants or from the Dutch Antilles, the former Dutch colonial empire. There are still special relations that the Netherlands has with a lot of these countries that it used to colonize and own. And a lot of the women who are in the data appear as Dutch women are not, mainland white Dutch women. But anyway, this study still had extremely concerning statistics, many, many, many anecdotes from the legal industry, including the infamous windows. And we are presuming that women in prostitution have some kind of superpower where they can just stop men from assaulting them. What is going on in people's minds where the man who is not safe for his nurse and not safe for his fellow patient is safe for the woman at the brothel? You have to believe that there's something specific about her character, her personality, or her skills that makes the situation fundamentally different and okay for her. And if you don't, then you are saying this group of women is rape fodder. That is what that is saying. Okay, carrying on with the article. Let's see if I'll ever get through this in full. The hospital does not advertise to its patients to visit the specific brothel with whom they have the price reduction arrangement. There's also no written contract. They just have a verbal agreement, and this offer does not apply for patients who are only there for a temporary stay during a psychological crisis. In all wards, the nurses have been informed in writing about the arrangement with the brothel. Patients who want to satisfy their sexual needs are accompanied to the brothel. You're taking care of people all day long, and then you have to take them to the brothel. Can you imagine? And it should say male patients. We're not sending the female patients to call boys. Not that if we were, I would endorse that. I would not. Like, can you imagine sending highly traumatized women into brothels with men in them? First of all, brothels with men in them, I am not aware of any in existence in my country or the Netherlands. They may exist, but I have not yet found any, because there are so-called male call boys for women, but it is not institutionalized the way that it is when the sexes are reversed. And I don't have a lot of information on this. I do consider it abuse when a wealthy woman, purchases access to the body of a man in prostitution. In the vast majority of cases, especially, in the form of sex tourism, that's when the power differential is pretty stark. But I had a woman share an anecdote with me, a woman with a disability, and I won't, say anything that could possibly identify her, but I'll just say a woman with a disability contacted me saying that she wanted to know what sex was like, and she ordered a call boy, changed her mind, wanted him to leave, and essentially found herself being assaulted. I am not saying female Johns are victims. I am saying, can you truly imagine a healthy way in which highly traumatized women who have been institutionalized for years or for life, who really have had their rights removed, their, freedom of movement, etc., but we found them, let's say, masturbating in front of a nurse, and therefore we're like, I think they want to have sex, let's get a call by. Like, what is the mechanism there? That actually goes for some nonverbal or cognitively impaired male patients as well. Finding a patient masturbating is not consent to going into prostitution. Like, how clear do they have to verbalize their need? And how do you make sure that, a particularly vulnerable patient, especially the female ones, don't end up assaulted in any of these scenarios? And so from what the article says, we are not talking about female patients, but I was just trying out this thought experiment if we were. Okay, the article continues, sexual acts take place in almost all psychiatric institutions. At this particular hospital, however, there is great embarrassment among the staff about sex in the hall or on the toilet. Therefore, we quickly, we avoid the topic and we don't solve anything. Okay, so it's clear that there has to be a conversation about this, but in a manner that doesn't endorse the abuse of any woman, be it like a nurse or a patient or a woman in a brothel. The article continues, night porters had to deal with women who first came to live in a male community of chronic psychiatric patients. Women could not defend themselves against men with years of pent-up desires. They were abused, some even several times a night, by men who alternated. Okay, so here we're talking about the gang rape of already traumatized women. It's like, what the fuck is happening? And I know this has been happening for years and years and years, and somehow it's still happening. That a lot of these psychiatric wards, like, let's take prostitution out of the picture, they are mixed sex and so unsafe that they cannot even stop the gang rape of female patients by male patients. And over the last couple of years, I met a lot of women who had to stay in psychiatric hospitals after severe trauma, and these places either somehow facilitated their prostitution, like they would let women out during the day, to like go back to their pimps or like do engage in prostitution, And they wouldn't say anything. They wouldn't be like, are you well enough to make that decision? Is this safe for you? Isn't this where you were trapped? Like, staff knowing and not saying anything, and also placing women repeatedly in harm's way, like having aggressive men, sexually predatory men around sexually traumatized women. And I think the solution is obvious. We need women-only psychiatric wards now, everywhere. No men in there. No male carers, no male therapists, no male cleaning staff, and fucking no predatory male patients. Okay, someone who has worked in hospital organizing, is there a practical reason why sex segregation is not the norm for people who are known to staff to be highly traumatized? Why is there no sex segregation? Is there a practical reason that it is truly not possible to sex segregate? At least remove the male patients and very carefully vet the male staff. If that is, like, if you've got a lack of, women make up most of psychologists. Like, I would be surprised, and nursing staff too, I'd be surprised if you couldn't make the staff female, but maybe there's a practical reason why you can't. Why are we doing mixed sex wards? Why? Is there any reason? Gang rapes of traumatized women in psychiatric hospitals, excuse me for getting upset, it's just, I cannot believe that this is not preventable. I know that cases like this have been happening for years. Why is nothing changing? This is such a simple matter to solve. And you can all cancel me also for believing that it should not be possible for a predatory, like the staff knowing that he's predatory man, to identify as a woman and get into the female ward. And this is not me ignoring that there is violence against, biologically male people who identify as trans in all kinds of institutions. I know there is, and I want them to be safe too, but it does not come at a price for women. You can cancel me. I don't care. I'll stand by that. Okay. I'll try to get to the rest of the article faster so this video doesn't get too long. So the article does, the person who came up with this program does talk about how vulnerable people should not, still must be protected from violence. But I'm like, how? And the women in brothels, they're not worthy of protection? You're literally outsourcing rapists to them. The person who came up with this brilliant plan also says these mental health institutions even attract men from outside who know that women can be found there, who allow themselves to be abused for a pittance out of lack of self-respect, incest experience, mania, or lust. What the fuck is this article? What the fuck is this? There are women in psychiatric hospitals who enjoy being sexually exploited for pennies. Okay, I'm not going to go into that because I'll go on a rant that will just last too long. But this person at least kind of recognizes to some extent that there are men who willfully, and this will go for the male staff too, is like, if you ask me, no male staff in any rape shelter, hospital ward with especially vulnerable patients, especially psychiatric hospitals, not in prisons. Like, kick all the male staff out too. Absolutely. I'd be happy for there to be no male gynecologists also. And divert all that money to all the women who want to study medicine. In my country, Germany, we have so many people who want to study medicine and can't. Literally just take all the spaces away for gynecology from the men, give it to the women. Like, for real. What else can I say that's cancelable today? When you think it's common sense. The article concludes, there was a study done at the hospital about sexuality and privacy, and women in it did not dare to speak up about sexual abuse. Okay, so that's a sign that this institution, the women there, do not trust it, right? The study also discussed a visit to a porn cinema and a brothel, the specific brothel that the institution is making this deal with. Male patients responded enthusiastically. For the first time, their need for sexual intercourse was discussed in a serious way. Well, what a fantastic study. The women didn't dare speak up about the reality of being afraid of being re-traumatized in the place where they're supposed to heal from trauma. And the men who view women as meat pieces were enthusiastic about being able to use two violent, dehumanizing, traumatizing industries that portray women as meat pieces. It's fucking wonderful. I mean, clap, clap, Netherlands, like you're almost as beautiful as my country, Germany, in your treatment of women and sexuality. Just awesome. The brothel operator in this case, no psychiatry because she herself was a psychiatric nurse. She offered the lower price and guarantees the quality of what's on offer. Excuse me, the quality of what's on offer. You mean women? She says the prostitutes engaged for these services will specifically be selected. And a prostitute from another brothel will give courses to female patients. They will learn how to stand up for themselves. Are you fucking kidding me? It's like, this is the end of the article. Okay. I want to throw things. So this sex program for men is you will get specifically selected women. The pro-prostitution lobby will say, wonderful, you're doing everything right because you're telling the women, hey, you will be, like the next shift, there's a guy coming in and he's like participated in a rape of female patients. Can you like quiet him down, please? Because you're so good at that. And can you make sure you give him really good service for half the price? Yeah, that would be wonderful. And I mean, that's all in line with what the prostitution lobby says, because they say absolutely anything short of overt murder is fine. Just find me a woman who says she wants to do that. Okay. And then for the female patients, women in prostitution who deal with trying to fight off, or at least being worried about sexual assault on the daily, will teach the women in the psychiatric hospital on how to do self-defense and try to avoid getting, assaulted on the daily. And when the women have spent enough time at the brothel being abused by these male patients and, your regular Johns, your taxi drivers and politicians and all the other creeps, then they'll be so traumatized. They can then go into the facility and get some help. No, I mean, the migrant women, they will be deported from the Netherlands when they're no longer useful. And they can go back to their home villages and, live there on tiny social security, or end up, homeless or re-exploited. Or I'll stop it here before this gets too long. And I'm sorry if this wasn't perfectly coherent. I'm just upset. And this doesn't really happen that much, actually. I know that I jump on this channel like more often when I am upset, so it might sound like I'm upset all the time. But this particular article, that is just unforgivingly awful, misogynistic, rape apologist disaster wormhole. Like, it did get to me and I had to release that somehow, and so this is what you get. So please, guys, if you out there hear people saying prostitution is needed to pacify men, in that sense, the safest place for a woman to walk at night would be outside a brothel, because the men know inside they can do whatever, and outside they'll come out all pacified, right? And not, looking at women like pieces of meat. Because, I mean, I made a whole video about how the sex industry trickles out into wider society and why it matters for the safety and growth of all women that we don't have a literal institution that says, pick a hair color, pick a body type, pick a skin color, pick a sex act, and we'll deliver a woman to you like you just ordered, a pizza. That's all for now. Please try and help. Talk to the people around you. When this topic comes up, say something. Don't let this be normalized. No woman in the world is rape fodder. There is no woman born who is like a born nympho to absorb all the awfulness. Don't spread this, and say something whenever you see it. Like, this is the absolute minimum we owe to women in prostitution, to not make their lives harder by sending suspected or convicted rapists their way.